Hello, and welcome to The Hump with Katie Thiroux. I'm your host, Katie Thiroux, and I'm bringing you interviews with some incredible artists, finding out why are they so amazing, how did it all happen, and what can we learn from their journey. Before we get started today, I'd like to thank our sponsors. And first up, we have Jams World. Okay, you all know how much I love Jams World. I'm wearing a Jams World right now. It's a family-owned and operated clothing company based in Honolulu, Hawaii since 1964. Their fabric is so cool and so comfortable because it's made from 100% spun-crushed rayon. And it's real art screen printed right onto the fabric, so I feel like I'm wearing something unique made just for me. Go to jamsworld.com and use the promo code JAZZ15 and you'll get 15% off your entire online purchase. That's jamsworld.com. Up next, we have Kolstein's. And Kolstein's is my most favorite string shop to visit in the entire world. It's based in Long Island, New York, and anytime I'm in New York City, I make a special trip out to Kolstein's to see what new things they've got going on. They do everything from instrument repair to building basses. They build beautiful double basses, strings, and rosin. You name it, they do it. And they are just so knowledgeable and so helpful there. Go to Kolstein.com and use the promo code KATIE10 and you'll get 10% off your entire online purchase. That's Kolstein.com. I'd also like to remind you that I'm bringing you brand new episodes of The Hump every Wednesday, every Hump Day. So download and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and go follow us on Instagram at The Hump with Katie. You don't want to miss a beat of what's going on over here. All right, I am pretty excited and just incredibly honored to bring you our guest today, the bassist, educator, and author, David Alan Moore. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I can't even count how many times I got to see him perform in the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And from my perspective, he was so young, and it just gave me that extra edge. I saw someone else doing it at such a young age, and I was like, I can do that too. I can pursue my dreams. We had a blast talking, interesting conversation. I had never met him before, but like I said, I've seen him, and he's got this amazing new book out for bass players called Fractal Fingering, and it has the seal of approval from Gustavo Dudamel, the conductor of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. It was just so much fun. So without further ado, here's David Alan Moore. Well, David Alan Moore, do you prefer David or Dave?
David.
Okay,
Only people that have known me more than 20 years call me Dave because from back in school and things like that. But David's fine.
David, and Davey's a no-no.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you'd have to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of hurdles to jump before that would be okay.
Yeah, that's like me when they're like, Kate is cool, right? And it's like,
Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you're really angry with me. But David Alan Moore, thank you so much for joining us on The Hump today.
Of course.
I'm really glad that you were like top of my list to talk with.
Thanks.
In general, because you're just so fabulous. But no, it's really an honor to have you here today.
Well, thanks for asking me.
That's it, and we're done.
Okay, awesome.
Well, cool. I'm going to be a little selfish and ask things that basically just I'm curious about right now because I grew up in Los Angeles and got to see you, I guess, from my point of view, see you kind of grow as well a little bit. I think I took a master class with you at Colburn when maybe I was 13, maybe 12 or 13.
Oh, wow.
And you looked much different. And I also like that you've had these different transformations throughout your life.
Mm-hmm. I get bored.
Yeah, exactly. We got to do something. So I can't wait to see what you're going to do next. But anyways, I wanted to see, you've accomplished so much and there's so much more to do, right? But I want to start from your bass beginnings because I know you didn't start on upright. It was electric, and that's kind of scary for some people to make that move. So can you just tell me a little bit about that, how you started electric and then shifted to upright?
Yeah, for sure. Well, my dad was an amateur electric bass player. He just loved traditional blues. Like he loved Lightnin' Hopkins and Willie Dixon and Muddy Waters and guys like that. And he just wanted to do more with the music than just listen to it. So he bought this old Gibson SG copy. It wasn't even a Gibson, but it was that sort of, I always think of Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath with that style.
Was it a Gibson
guitar
with a Z instead of an S?
GHIBZ and HN. Yeah. But so he got that and a little amp, and he would play along with the tunes, out of books that he got from a music store. And so that bass was just lying around in the living room, and I kind of gravitated towards it and started messing around on it. And pretty much from day one, I was hooked on electric bass. So
And were you just like playing music that you heard from the radio, or was it what were you into at that time?
Oh, I remember when I first got serious about it and I wanted to take lessons. It was back when there used to be music stores like with the pianos and organs in the malls, and someone would be out front playing on the organ.
Yeah.
So they had guitar and bass lessons in the back, and I remember going in for my first lesson wearing a Motley Crue T-shirt, and the first thing the teacher says, "I'm not going to teach you how to play that."
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, but it's my money. Like,
yeah.
Why won't you teach me how to play that? So, but he got me started, and then I kind of moved on from there.
And if you don't mind my asking, like, what area did you grow up in?
Silver Lake, and
okay.
right in LA.
Homegrown.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Silver Lake before it was Silver Lake.
Yeah, before it was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like music was.
That's like the most hipster thing you could possibly say. I lived in Silver Lake before it was cool.
I know. My dad lived there for a while and then moved away to Ashland, Oregon, which is now very cool. It's cool. So he went from cool to cool. Okay, so you growing up in Silver Lake, it's cool. There's music. You're in Los Angeles, so you weren't like thirsty to find live music. Like it was around.
Yeah. No, I mean, I when I at that age, I wasn't going out to bars and clubs or anything like that. But I had friends from school, and we would get together on after school and on weekends, and whoever had the biggest living room or could accommodate a drum set, and just play covers of whatever we were listening to at the time.
Were you at the stage yet either where it's like, hey, my parents asked us to play for their anniversary party? Like, were you that?
No, that's once I started playing upright and started doing more jazz. They really didn't want to hear what we had to do when we're doing Iron Maiden covers and things like that. That's not really anniversary party music.
Yeah. Is that music? Because I know like what we first are into is like ingrained in us. Would you still put on a Motley Crue record? And
no, I mean, I sort of when I say that taste evolved, like most of the bands like that I like tend to be Swedish for some reason. It's like coincidentally, I hear the stuff I like, and then I find out that they're from Sweden or Norway or Finland or something like that. But and that's more like when I'm running and things like that. I don't listen to that casually as much anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still enjoy that stuff.
Nice. So, and you ended up going to USC for electric bass, which I didn't even know was possible at that time. I know that was also taboo, like going in on electric.
Well, it was one of the few places I had attended the Berklee summer semester. There was like the 5 week. I can't remember exactly how they built it. Yeah, it was like a 5 weeks session because I was sure that that's where I was supposed to go and where I wanted to end up. And one thing that was a big eye opener for me there is I met a lot of great players and was doing a lot of great playing and jam sessions and things like that. But it seemed like after a certain hour, when like the heavies came out, they're like, "Oh, you're great, but we really want to play with an upright player." Like all the serious jazz players wanted to kind of go that route. And so I, sheepishly pack up my things and go back into the practice room and realized I wanted to be somewhere where I could kind of do both. And I knew that I wanted a program where there was a focus on classical double bass playing as well, because that was the best route to get good at that instrument as opposed to like taking jazz classes or something like that.
Yeah, but it seemed like you accelerated quickly, unless you're hiding something from us, because you didn't start playing upright until much later, right?
No, I couldn't play a 1-octave G major scale as a freshman. In
college, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, as on electric bass, I got kind of not kicked out of the department, but I auditioned on electric bass, and they said, "Great, we don't have anything to teach you on electric bass. Go study with Melchior Leviev for jazz harmony and piano, but we don't know what to do with you on electric bass," because that had been a really big focus. But for upright, like I had no knowledge or skills. I tried to start in high school. I wanted to get done with it. I mean, I wanted to get started at it earlier. And the instrument that I had access to at my high school was just so atrocious. It's like, why would anyone want to do this? And so as soon as I got a hold of a good instrument, it's like, I realized how much, not time that I had wasted, but I just missed out because I thought it was the terrible instrument gave me the wrong impression of what it was like to play.
Yeah, I know. It's like you get this big wooden box with like some like steel on it. The string 6 inches off the fingerboard, half gut.
It's
Exactly.
all terrible.
But when you finally got like a better instrument, was it? Did you realize that the crossover from electric to bass? I mean, it's different, but it's not crazy, right?
I think I was fortunate because I was already, I could already play. I was already playing with groups. I was actually gigging and stuff in high school and playing electric bass, but in jazz trios and things like that, places around town. I had a electric bass teacher that I think it was a mutually beneficial arrangement. He would have me like cover the first set for him while he came from another gig. And so I got like a little bit of experience and he got to double book for the night.
Yeah.
And then I got thrown into a lot of situations playing upright before I could really play. Like I played this big band with a drummer named Arthur von Blumberg. And he had this band called The Beast, where we would do Louis Bellson type big band arrangements, popular tunes in punk clubs.
Oh, cool.
So we'd like go on after a punk band and then have this big band with a singer doing a big band arrangement of a Tom Waits tune or something like that. So, but I was really fishing around because I didn't have any background on the instrument at the time.
Yeah. So when you started studying, and you studied with like Dennis Tremblay, Paul Allison, John Clayton. So when they showed you what was up, how much time were you spending trying to figure it out?
I remember, I wish I remember his name because it was such a influential request, or not request, or suggestion when I was a student. And I'll clean it up for wider audiences, but he basically said, like, you need to be practicing and taking care of biological imperatives, and that's it. Like, nothing else. And so I didn't know much at that point. Like, I don't think anybody did much about practice organization or deliberate practice or any of that kind of stuff. It was just like, wake up, practice, use the bathroom, practice, eat, practice. And so it was, 6-8 hour days of as much time as I could put in as possible.
Yeah. And at USC at that point, I mean, I know you teach there now. It's an intense, conservatory. Were you surrounded by like-minded people that were doing the same thing?
There were a few of us, like, I don't know if you know Jesse Murphy. He plays with John Schofield and other guys like that.
Yusef.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know him. Like, I was Dave and he was Jesse. So we moved on.
David, I'm so cool that I knew that.
Yeah. So, there were several of us that were like that. Sam Ferrer was another one. Tom Fowler. I'm just trying to think of all the names of all the people that kind of did the crossover thing where we were not classical majors, but we studied with John and either studied with Dennis or Paul and kind of out and tried to absorb all of the classical bass stuff that was possible. But, certainly not having any skill set or ability at all in the classical department, just trying to be around it and soak it up.
But so you weren't even involved in the classical department at all? Not
at first, no.
Okay.
There was a point where, and I get a little fuzzy on the timeline with this. I just know that in my junior year, I got kind of fed up with, and I'll say this is just for me, I won't make it a blanket sort of soapbox indictment of jazz education other than John Clayton, who can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned. But I just kind of realized, especially working with John, that it was like there was a vocabulary and a tradition and an experience that was necessary in order to play jazz at the level that I wanted to, and that was not to be found in an institution. And what was to be found in an institution was the background on the instrument to be able to become a good player, and then the jazz was a different experience. And so I realized, while I'm gigging around town, I'm playing in groups, I could switch to a classical major and actually get something out of my college education and then do jazz on the side. And so that was still the plan when I changed majors as a junior.
And I can only imagine like how supportive John Clayton was of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about John, and I mean everything that I have as far as an aesthetic for bass playing, for upright bass playing especially, but as far as feel, sound, tradition, vocabulary, I owe it all to John. He was amazing and continues to be amazing. It's just I don't have as much interaction with him anymore. But
yeah, I know. Like, I feel like anytime I see him play or especially teach, I feel like I'm watching a wizard.
Oh God,
just someone spin some magic.
Yeah. No, he was amazing. We had him. I teach at Domaine Forget in Canada over the summers, and we had him as a guest one year, and so he came in sort of the last week, and it was like bringing up the heavy hitter after the bases are loaded to just like everything we'd been doing up to that point was like prepping it for him to come in and knock it out of the park. And it was just great.
Yeah. This is like a John Clayton little love fest for a second, but I've learned so much, not just from watching him play, learning from him, but just watching him interact with people too. Everyone from the person, pulling the curtain at the show, the person taking tickets. It's like, he's just so eloquent, elegant, and gives his time.
John gets human being lessons.
Yeah.
That's how I would characterize it. I mean, it's like it focuses through his bass playing, or people get attracted to him, wanting to be around him or work with him because of the music, but he truly gives human being lessons.
Oh, yeah, I agree. That's cool. Okay, so back to you, David. Like I said, I feel like you just fast tracked. Like, so you're practicing 6-8 hour days, and I know you graduated from USC. You finished, and also I'm curious, like, when the classical music was coming up, was that something you were interested in? Like, were you listening to classical music before that?
Just as much as my sort of non-musician family exposed me to. Like, I was a big fan of Fantasia when I was little. It wasn't like listening to Beethoven piano concertos casually as a teenager. I was, transcribing Jeff Berlin and Jaco and doing stuff like that on electric bass. And in middle school, that was sort of my thing then. It was mostly that I had the opportunity, I think this was right around my junior year again, it must have been because it was like 1992, to go to the Academy at the Grand Teton Music Festival. They used to have what they called the Grand Teton Music Seminar, which was sort of like an Aspen style summer festival. And it was kind of the first time I got to play in an orchestra at that level. I had played at school, but this was, great players from all over the country, plus principal players from major orchestras sitting in the orchestra. And I just remember at the end of that summer thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to get to do this again. Like, this is it. And something kind of snapped, for lack of a better word, in me. And I feel very fortunate that I had that kind of realization, because I know a lot of players that do a lot of different things, and I think that's great for them, and that's what they want to do. They want to be kind of versed in a little Latin jazz, a little electric bass, kind of a session player, because they feel the variety is what brings them enjoyment or fulfillment, whatever. But for me, I was like, I want to sort of ride one horse as far as I can go and see how it goes. So it's also kind of in my personality. I just like, okay, no more jazz done. Goodbye, jazz. Mourn the loss of jazz, and let go 100% into the classical. Yeah.
And that's cool. It's like you got a taste of it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
well, I think it was also like it was just sort of a pragmatic thing, it kind of the same thing I did with the degree, which was like, I can call 5 of my friends or 3 of my friends or 2 of my friends and play a trio, quartet, quintet anytime I want, but I can't call 102 of my friends and play a Mahler symphony anytime I want. So I did have ideas or thoughts of kind of doing both, but it was sort of, pushing it down the line, because I knew I had to focus on that.
Yeah. And I'm always so curious, like, what, again, it's not that much different, the classical and the jazz, like when you graduate from somewhere. But I'm always curious, like, what do classical musicians do when they graduate from college or university or conservatory? So, because I know you joined Houston Symphony like in 96, like a few years after you graduated. But what was that space in between?
Well, immediately after I finished my undergrad, I was considering going to graduate school, but I didn't really get the financial support from the university that I needed. It was basically, I was kind of told going to graduate school is about, kind of getting them to pay for your education. You play in the orchestra, you take certain classes, and you try and get them to pay for your education. And the deal that they offered me was I would be paying more than the hourly cost of the lessons to go to school. So I was with Ed Barker in Boston, the principal of the BSO, and I just said, Ed, can I just study with you privately? This seems like not a great idea. Yeah. And he said, oh, you won't show up. You'll say you'll show up, but I know people always say that. And I said, fine, 15 lessons a semester, 15 times your fee. Here's that up front. Like, I'm serious. I want to do this. So I went there for, planned to be there as long as I needed to be. I thought Boston was a good kind of central place to be located, be closer to, a lot of the cities on the East Coast are much more close together than California. But after being there for a year, I got a call from the LA Phil because my former teacher, Dennis Tremblay, had recommended me to sub for a year.
Mm-hmm.
They had a year contract open, and looking back on it, I probably wasn't quite ready for that, but I managed to survive. So I went there for a year and then took off the last day of work at the Phil to audition for Houston. And it all kind of lined up in a way like that. So there was no gap for me in that way.
That's amazing when things just line up like that. But it seemed like you had a plan. So what was like some of your big takeaways from filling in the LA Phil for a year?
Well, the couple things. The first thing was I got really super prepared before I started, and then realized that after that first week, there was going to be another week after that, and oh my God, it like never stops. It's sort of like it's like Lucy on the conveyor belt. With the chocolate. It's just like it never stops. And one of the most valuable conversations I had with someone is they said, if you feel like you're sort of in a box and the water is coming up and you're just barely keeping your head above water the whole time, you're doing it right. Like that for about 5 years. Because over time, when you first start, every program is unfamiliar repertoire. You might have the standard rep that you've worked on in school, but there's a lot of other music. So it's just this onslaught week after week after week after week. And then after about 5 years, it starts to be, there's only 2 pieces on this program that I don't know instead of all 3, or there's only 1 piece that I don't know, or everything except for maybe the premiere or the new work. And so it gradually gets easier. But the first year was, I was practicing constantly, and even practicing like Sunday morning before the last Sunday concert of a week, still for that same program and for the program the week after. It was just relentless, but it was great. That's the only way to, you get something out of doing it that way that you never get from just practicing. Like with jazz, you're on the bandstand is the place to learn it, and not the practice room. Exactly.
And I'm curious, did you feel welcomed in the bass section and the orchestra?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That was never an issue. Yeah. Okay. Intimidated for sure. Yeah. And shy and self-conscious and all those things, but everyone was very, very welcoming. And it's a great resource when you're in orchestra, because when you develop relationships with people, you have this ready group of really high level artists that you can say, hey, can I play something for you? Can I run something by you? So that was really valuable for my Houston audition, that I had so many people there that I could, play my auditions for. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because there's a lot of hazing in the jazz community.
Oh, we have our own version, but I won't share it, because then it'll spoil it for the people when they join the bass section. So
good. Excellent.
It'll remain an inside secret.
Amazing.
It's very G-rated. And wholesome, and brings me great joy, but I don't want to spoil it.
Okay, because I've got some R-rated things.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in the Houston Symphony, and I love this too. Like for musicians, it's like you get to move around. So how long were you in Houston for?
3 years, 96 to 99.
And I'm just curious, how did you like Houston? How was the scene there?
Houston, even though I don't know where it ranks sort of as a metropolis these days, I was kind of surprised. I didn't know much about Texas. I just sort of had these arbitrary, naive markers of what would be an appropriate job. It was like, if they had major sports teams, and if I liked the conductor and the principal bass, like that'd be a good place to go. So it's like Houston had major sports teams.
Yeah.
I knew the principal bass and the conductor. I knew I liked them. So like, okay, I'm going there. I really knew nothing about Texas. I didn't realize Houston was, I think it was New York, LA, Chicago, Houston. Like at the time, it might be even third now, but I didn't realize it was up there in terms of largest cities in the country. Yeah. And Texas is its own thing. I will say that for sure. And it's a big city, but the scene is much more insular, meaning there's not a lot of, when you look at the certain aspects of society in a city like that, they don't necessarily support what goes on in town as much, because they go, if I want to go hear the opera, I'll go to New York and hear the Met. I'm not going to support in town as much. So there's some interesting dynamics. It's a little more provincial in that way, but it was a great 3 years. It really kind of set me up for future things.
And while you're there, are you just focused on the orchestra, or are you teaching at the same time?
Oh, God. No, when I was there, when I think back on it now, when I had a double rehearsal, I was toast after, it was a really challenging thing to be able to do more than just what was required of the job at first. I mean, of course, there was the preparation, the practice that you'd have to do for the job. But when I think about it now, how I'm teaching a full studio and practicing and doing the orchestra at the time, like I could not have conceived of that.
Yeah, just the time management.
Yeah. Well, time, not even just time management, just time. Out of brain cells. Yeah. Out of brain cells, and body is tired and cannot do anything else. So you kind of develop that muscle literally and figuratively over time. And so now I'm able to do more.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Fabulous. Like you're like a one and done. You're cut and dry, David. I love it. Okay, so I'm just doing this chronologically because again, this is for me. I'm the only one listening to this. So you make your way back to LA. Is it because of the LA Phil, or is it because of USC?
Well, I came back to LA because I always wanted to be home. I always knew this was a great orchestra and a place that I wanted to be, especially after having experienced the year in the orchestra. And so while I was in Houston, I took a couple auditions kind of in preparation, knowing that LA would be coming up soon. And so it was just always a destination job for me in that way. I wasn't in Houston. I wasn't taking everything that came up, like you do when you're first starting or something like that. I feel like Houston was a very solid place to be, but that being from LA, I knew that was an eventual goal. And I got really fortunate because after my position, we had a 15-year drought in bass auditions, just because nobody retired or moved on or passed on or anything like that. So,
and that's interesting.
Had that not happened,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, had that not happened, I probably would have missed my window. Like I don't know that when I was 45, if I would be trying to relocate as opposed to being 29 or 30.
Yeah, exactly. I find that interesting too. Like, you're taking auditions to prepare for that, because you had to re-audition for the LA Phil, right? Or no?
Well, I didn't audition the first time. The first time was by recommendation.
High recommendation, yeah.
Yeah, but it was just a temporary contract. Yeah. But for my first position there, that was a nationally advertised blind audition. I had to come back and do that, and then I auditioned again within the first year because there was an advancement spot within the orchestra that was only an internal audition. So I did auditions within the first 11 months or so.
Yeah. And how come you take, like, especially in with classical music, how come you take other auditions to prepare for another audition?
Because the audition process is sort of a skill unto itself. It's become that because it's just the number of players and the competitive nature of it. And so, and actually my audition for the Phil was one of the last ones. I think it was the last one we did. That was this sort of old school format. Like now I would do the same preparation now, but the repertoire is very specifically delineated by bars, like something from this piece, something from that piece. And then to be in a position where you're playing what I've characterized as being the world's most poorly programmed unaccompanied bass recital, because you don't know the order of the pieces. You can sort of build an arc or a story of your set list, as it were. It's just, they throw at you whatever they want to throw at you, and you have to be nimble and be able to deal with it. And so that's one of the things in the preparation process, is putting yourself under duress, being able to show what you can do within a 5-minute window, at least in the first rounds, because you don't really get a second chance for stuff. But on my audition, they had 7 complete works. There were no excerpts. It was just Beethoven 9, Beethoven 5, Bruckner 7, Mozart 35. There were no excerpts, so that even beyond that, then when you got into the audition, you knew it was going to be something from that piece, but you didn't know what part it would be. So
I like
that's
that.
kind of a different animal.
Yeah.
I like it in some ways, but it's a different kind of preparation that's really challenging.
Yeah. Just curious, like when you're auditioning like that and you're playing these excerpts, you're playing Beethoven's 9th or 5th, are you imagining yourself in the section? What's mentally happening?
There's sort of the, peak performance sports strategies that we have to use for auditions, in terms of having a pre-shot routine with kind of calming yourself, centering yourself, having trigger words as far as something. For me, it was something physical and something musical. So there might be something I needed to remember about my body, about staying loose or keeping my shoulders relaxed or something like that. And then a character word associated with the piece. And then I tried to do what I always coach my students to do now, which is the playing has to be evocative. It has to be something where it's like hearing a really poorly engineered recording of the piece where all you can hear is one bass. So that if you listen really closely, maybe in the background, you can hear the rest of the orchestra, so that someone on the panel can envision how their part would kind of fit with what you're doing.
Yeah.
So certainly, it's not just playing the bass part by itself, because you can always tell. For me, it was always like, that's like with walking lines. I take it back to John, that like, I could tell the difference between someone who had transcribed Israel Crosby and Paul Chambers and Ray Brown, or someone who had learned out of the Let's Learn How to Walk Bass Lines book, because there was sort of an academic correctness to it, but it missed the vocabulary or the feel or the, you sort of have to project experience before you have it in some of those situations.
Yeah.
So,
that's a great way of putting it. And so just to shift a little bit, you're such an amazing teacher. I don't know how many students you've had over the years, because now, how long have you been teaching at USC?
This is my 21st year.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I started right when I started with the orchestra. So I started in 2000. And
how did that happen? Everything. You're even Steven, David.
Yeah.
It's like you moved to LA, you have 2 jobs, and they're like the best jobs.
Oh, the dean at the time was Larry Livingston, and they were looking for someone to add to the faculty at that time, and I was the new guy in the orchestra, so that made sense to pursue me. And an alumni, USC has a kind of a tradition of keeping people in the family in that way. And I remember at the time he said, you can't just wake up when you're 40 and decide you want to teach. I'm like, okay, because it was never something that was on my radar. I didn't want to do it. I didn't like doing it. And he just said, I think you'd be good at this, but you just can't decide later on that you want to do this. You start from now. And so I think I was 29 when I started at SC.
Yeah.
But that just, it was a lot of really fortunate timing again, that, there happened to be an opening when I started.
Yeah. When you're first teaching at USC, like you hadn't done a lot of it up to that point, and you said you didn't want to do it. How was like that first year, that first batch of students? Were you kind of just going from lesson to lesson? Did you kind of learn how to organize quickly?
Well, I think, when you first start teaching, if you've had good teachers and mentors up to that point, you parrot a lot of the good advice that you've had. So I had my own organization and how I put my auditions or recitals together, and things that I had learned from Paul and Ed and John and Dennis. And so I just kind of said, well, here's what I did. I did that sort of route of things. I didn't really, it's like, just like being a player. I didn't have my own voice as a teacher yet. So I relied on the experience and the teaching that I'd had. It actually went pretty well. It was more challenging in the sense that, the more established I've become as a teacher, people come to study with me in particular. They know what I'm about, or they've met me somewhere and they want to study with me, versus when I started at SC, people were either studying with somebody else or just wanted to go to USC. And then I was like, oh my God, who's this fool that is coming in and trying to teach me? And so, I had to establish rapport and trust. And it was a different animal than now, where I don't have to do quite the same work like that to get started.
You're distinguished, David.
You mean old?
No, you're a distinguished faculty member now.
Yeah.
Just to go back to the LA Phil for a second. I've probably seen you play, I don't know. At least, let's say like 20, probably 50 times, let's say. So you've been in the orchestra for quite some time. You've had some amazing conductors. Are there any standout moments for you? That's a tough one.
Actually, it's funny, because that's one that gets asked a lot, like in various situations like this. And I always had this pat answer, not because I wanted to just have an easy thing to say, but it's because it was true. It was like the first concert that we did in Walt Disney Concert Hall when it opened in 2003. That was a great performances broadcast for PBS doing Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. And it was like, I couldn't, everyone was so dialed in and so focused with the new building and the fact that it was a broadcast. But then we had in our centennial year, we had a performance that we did at the beginning of last season where we had 3 living music directors conducting a piece at the same time. And I remember being on stage during that going, oh, wow, I'm going to have to decide which one of these is that moment now, because this is kind of up there. I can't imagine another group doing something like that with Zubin Mehta and Esa-Pekka and Gustavo on the same stage at the same time, each doing their own kind of signature portions of the program and the piece written with all 3 of them. So those were 2 of them for sure.
Yeah, and I remember seeing you, and you were an inspiration to me because you visually looked younger than everybody.
I was actually younger.
Yeah, but you could see it. You could definitely see it if you have your eyesight. So, I didn't have to. I had that feeling I don't have to wait to do this, or I can do what I want now, because I was
that's great.
13, 14, and there's this kid in the orchestra. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, I was not, I may have looked young, but I was, when I subbed in the Phil, I was 24, and I guess I started when I was 25. No, I started in Houston when I was 25, so I was 29 when I started in LA.
And how common is that to get something like that young?
I think it's kind of a toss up. There's the folks that sort of work their way through the orchestra ranks, so they're kind of peaking at early mid 30s in terms of getting into one of the bigger groups. And then Vijay Gupta, who was a violinist that played with us, I think he started at 19.
Yeah.
Chris Hanulik started at 19. Dennis was 19. I mean, there were a lot. There have been sort of those prodigies and the people fresh out of school. It seems like these days the rhythm is that a lot of the jobs end up being won by people that are kind of just finishing their masters in their mid-20s, because they've been grinding for a good solid period of time and have good input and peers around them, and so they're just fired up and ready to go. But that seems like that's kind of the range right now. Yeah, at the time we didn't have that, but
I like that too. It's I think that's how orchestras get their sound. Of course, it's the conductor, but it's the life and breath of the musicians. And because, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have to re-audition every year you're in it. It's like Duke Ellington's band. You don't get fired. You either die or you quit. Mm-hmm. So you're in the band. So you're it's just amazing. People can be in it 20, 30, 40 years, and that's what gives the orchestra part of its sound.
Oh yeah, there's so much. I mean, when you think about the kind of vernacular that develops when you're in a small group on the road, just over a month or 6-week period, just between the shorthand and the in jokes and the camaraderie and musical rapport that happens in a situation like that, and then you expand that out to years and decades. It's a pretty special arrangement. I mean, it's kind of like a university position in a way, where there's a pretty intense 2-year period of probation. You win the audition, and then you have an untethered period where you get reviewed a lot, and there's not a re-audition or anything like that. But at the end of the first year, they can kind of give you the warning, and then at the end of the second year, let you go if they don't like you. But then if you get tenure, then you are in that position pretty much at your discretion. Yeah.
Well, good for you, David.
Thanks.
No, yeah, it's really amazing. I'd love to talk about your new book. Oh, I don't know if it's that new, but Fractal Fingering. Because this was, it's a new F word, it's the new F word among bass players.
Okay, nice.
In a good way. I love
never
the
heard
F-word.
it put that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an expletive, right? And I know some schools and universities use this book, and you're like the bass cartographer to me. It's you're mapping out this whole new world for us. So I kind of know why, because I've looked into it, why you came about this, but can you just tell us what inspired you to come up with this?
Well, it's one of those things that it's a new book, and that it's been out for about a year, but it took about 10 years to put together. And it's been out in various underground forms,
like little pamphlets and
literally Xeroxes and handouts and things that would give out at Domain. as we would do the various exercises. It originally came from, I was looking at the way that Edgar Meyer approached the instrument and looking at the way that Francois Rabat approached the instrument, which is more kind of my background and study. And I got asked by Hal Robinson to do a class at Curtis. And it's like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. A master class. Okay, I think I can do that. And he's like, oh, and can you also do a class on anything you want? Just like present a group class. And, at that time, it's like, what am I going to go to Curtis and teach these kids about? They're studying with Hal and Edgar Meyer. Like, this is embarrassing. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I was like, well, maybe I can come up with something that compares and contrasts kind of what Edgar and Francois do to just talk about different approaches. And I don't really remember the route from there, other than it sort of went from being a couple exercises to having a lot of light bulbs go off in my head to like, oh, wait, I can think about this in kind of a different way. And it helps me. I would sort of run scenarios. Like I realized I would see a player do something and go, oh, I can break that down into these component parts and really understand it. Like I would always describe it as a grammar. Like I can parse what they're doing. But then I also realized, okay, well, let me take a passage and let me run it through this language and see if I come out on the other side with something that looks like something that Edgar would do or something that Francois would do. And when I saw it doing that, it was like, okay, this has a lot of value for me because it can kind of work both ways. And it's not about like a new approach, meaning a different way of playing the bass or a new technique of playing the bass. For me, it was just a language of being able to more readily absorb something that I saw or more readily create something that I wanted to create. And it could work for anybody from any approach. So it wasn't exclusionary in any way.
Yeah, it's almost like the way you're describing it. It's like watching like a great basketball team, like watching a play and being able to, okay, let's do it this way and get the same outcome, right? But do it a different way.
Yeah, it is a system in a way, but it's just giving things, for me, it gave me more context and more understanding because I was never good at doing things that were just like, well, just do that. Like, well, why? How does that fit into the other thing you asked me to do? And what does that mean? And what is that called? And so I just, maybe it's a
Oh, there we are. Good.
There you are.
Yeah.
You froze on me for a second. Yeah.
Algae.
Do I need to back up or did you?
Why you said, why do I have to do this?
Oh, yeah. Just that I needed labels on everything. I needed reasons. I needed context. And so it wasn't just put your second finger here. It's like, well, why second finger, not first finger? Well, how do you get to the same spot every time? What does that have to do with the music? How does that facilitate what comes after it? All that kind of stuff. And so, it was really just it started off as a project for me. And then it also developed at Domaine Forget because what started happening there after I started working there, which has been about, God, how many years has that been now? I always remember it was the first year the iPhone came out. That's all I can remember. So I don't know if that's 13 years or something like that, but it's somewhere around that. That it presents kind of an interesting rubric to follow in that there's a class with 25 bass players in it in a large room, and you want to impart some kind of musical or technical knowledge without using music in the span of an hour that's engaging and useful. And so it kind of directs you in a very specific way. And so all of the stuff kind of came out of that and eventually kind of organically worked into I don't know if you want to call it a syllabus, but there was like a sequence of things that you would kind of go through. And I always resisted putting any materials together because to me, I always described it as being a yearbook rather than a textbook. It wasn't like, here's what you're going to do in the class this semester. It was like at the end of the semester, you go, remember all the good times we had? Here they are in the book. And then you would just see it and you would remember, but everybody learned everything by rote. They learned it by understanding the concept behind the exercise. No one was reading the exercise and trying to figure out the fingering. They would have like basically the whole book memorized by the end of the 2 weeks because it was all concepts and formulas or procedures as to how to do the exercises. So that's kind of why the book was a resistant thing for me.
But that's so valuable.
Yeah, and it's still how I like to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, having the Discover Double Bass videos really helps because then I can kind of virtually do it for someone. And
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know if I presented it that way, but I would still say, like, get the book and don't open it. Like, just keep it,
Yeah.
and then do the course and learn everything by rote. Don't even look at the transcriptions that they made for it, which I'm sure were a great expense for chess.
Yeah.
But like, just look at any of that until you're all done. And then if you're like, how did that one go again? And you look at it, oh yeah, okay, I got it. And you put it away. You don't stare at the music. So
amazing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So buy your course, but don't look at anything. Got it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you on for too much longer, David, excuse me. But I am.
Okay, Kate.
Yeah, thanks. Kathy is the worst. Oh,
okay. Oh,
yeah. So just
sick.
remember that one.
Yeah.
But what do you? So aside from bass and you teaching, and you got the F word, what are you doing for fun? I mean, I know just from listening to other things you've done, like you got into running. You got into this new hairdo. That's fun.
Well, this was supposed to be, it sort of evolved. Originally, it was, my wife was a little self-conscious about kind of going gray during quarantine. And so when it was possible to go back into a hair salon, I was like, well, I'm going to dye my hair gray on top and show her that it could look good and not to be self-conscious about it. And so it was like the reverse quarantine look, and I did it. And she's like, oh, I like that. You should keep doing that. So I did it again. And the last time I went, it didn't really take, so it kind of stayed blonde, but it is what it is. Right now I've been I'm trying to keep myself, what's the right way to put it, ready to pivot if necessary, because I really don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I have not played a live concert since March.
Yeah.
I've done some socially distant studio work and things like that, but that's been like 3 or 4 times. So I've started writing a lot in terms of text, not music per se. But I started a website. I started writing weekly newsletters about various musical and performance-based topics and send them out to my subscribers and things like that. And originally I had thought I was going to do something where, well, maybe it'll be another source of income and I'll do some online teaching or things like that. And then I just had this realization about, it's kind of part of the way through starting it, of this situation that we're in is so frustrating because there's so many players that aren't working. And so on one hand you go, okay, I have all this time, I can practice and I can transcribe and I can improve and I can learn new music and I can do X and this and this and this. And then you go, except I'm not working, so I don't have money to buy lessons or buy materials or do anything like that. So it's like being caught in the best and the worst situation at the same time. And so when I thought, what could I do about this? I thought, well, I can make myself available. I can have the means and the technology now with having to do online lessons for SC and familiarity with Zoom. So I started doing 2 weekly forums online that are free and open to everybody. And one's on Fridays at 7 p.m., mostly to accommodate people on the West Coast and further west than that. And then Sunday at 10 a.m., that's more kind of for East Coast and EU folks. Yeah. And I come up with something to do, or I field questions that people have sent in, and just to make something available so that people can leverage the time, so that hopefully when we come out of it, people have something that they can use. Yeah. Come out in a better place than they were before.
Yeah, it's kind of what I keep thinking too. It's just, I'm going to come out stronger, and I'm going to help other people come out stronger as well. Just be ready, to do anything. Last quick question, just because nothing to do with the bass, because you do run, right?
Okay.
But you run, right?
Less during quarantine.
Less during quarantine.
Yes.
But because I know people who are like way into exercise and running. I'm of the not of that. I walk a lot, but do you find like that helps your playing?
It does. I mean, there's sort of the general stress relief part of exercise, which is helpful, and I always try to remember, especially as bass players, that if bass playing is the most physically demanding thing that you do during the day, that you're probably asking for trouble. And I remember playing 4-hour jazz gigs and things like that. And, that's its own beast. Playing a Mahler symphony or a Wagner opera is a certain kind of beast, and playing a 4-hour gig is another beast, because all the horn players lined up in the front of the stage, you get to take when they're done playing, and the drummer and the bass player never stop. So the fitness in that way has definitely been helpful for playing, but then also with the running, of getting into kind of longer endurance events, they take a lot of preparation and planning and structure. And so all of those kind of things port over really easily towards, putting together a recording project or performance, or just anything that's a longer term endeavor. So yeah, for sure.
Okay. Very last question, then I'll let you go. What are you listening to these days? Or what are you reading? Anything, movie? What's interesting to you right now?
Well, right now I have it sounds weird, but it's sort of a fear-based workout because one of the things I'm actually terrified of is going back to work, not because I don't want to work or there's something about work that I fear. It's that the orchestra and orchestra life is kind of a juggernaut. And so to be out of it for as long as we have, I've sort of made this prediction and filed it away in an envelope that I fear as an industry, there's going to be a lot of injury once things come back, because we're used to playing 20 hours a week outside of practicing. So it's like 3 to 4 concerts a week, constant rehearsing, constant playing. And so I've reverted. I'm back to 5 hours of practice, 4 to 5 hours of practice a day, trying to keep in shape, learning new music. A lot of what I've been doing is kind of going back to old music, because the things that are more familiar allow me the opportunity to kind of dig deeper with bringing in new approaches and new techniques, as opposed to being more focused on new material, but kind of having to bring my current self to it. So, and then with the website, I'm spending a lot of time writing, because that ends up being a weekly thing. So there hasn't been that much kind of recreational listening and things like that. I did pull out a book I haven't looked at in a while called Sound and Motion by David McGill. That was something I haven't looked at in a while, and thought I would revisit that because it kind of fed into everything that I've been doing. But I'm trying to stay busy for that reason, because I did take a sabbatical several years ago from the orchestra, and coming back was, even though I was teaching full time and doing recitals and master classes and things, it was quite a shock to come back to a full schedule. Yeah. So I'm trying to be ready for anything as far as that goes.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm a huge fan of yours. You're an amazing teacher.
Thanks.
And I'll have all your links and everything to share, but you're just fantastic. And thank you so much, David.
Oh, of course. Anytime.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.